Oh boy, hey guys, Uncle Valk here. Rift mode. Sure is something, huh? Smoggy wasn't joking when they said this was going to be the new hardcore endgame content, and can't disagree. Spent a couple hours in the Discord earlier with a few endgame players, and even it took us a lot of reading and testing to kind of figure out what's going on. I'll be honest, I'm not happy about this game mode. I think it's poorly designed. There's a lot of places that are going to need improvements. It's one of the few times where, probably my first time complaining about a game mode, in-game content. So you guys know this is going to be a doozy. Let's just get right into it. Rift mode is the new hunt mode, and it's going to be a long-term replacement for hunt. I say hunt replacement because it'll be the new way for you to get gear, and completing it counts towards hunt achievements and gives expedition posters. I say long term because, well, it's going to take a bit of farming to get there. Don't worry, you got time. Season of Rift is said to be 4 to 6 months, and boy, are we going to need that time to farm. Before we even talk about the content, let's talk about whether or not it's even worth it. If you're confident in calling yourself an endgame player like myself, then yes, it is worth it, but it'll take you time to get there. If you're not sure if you're even an endgame player, this is probably not the game mode for you. Just leave it. It takes way too much effort and resources for the rewards, and there's going to be just a little bit better than Hunt. If you're new or casual, just skip this event entirely and maybe even skip the video. Promise you won't hurt my feelings. I appreciate you watching already. But if you're actually here to try to grind through this hellhole or support the channel, hey, join me for this wild ride as we cruise through the minds of Smoutgate's wildest game designs, Rift mode. So reward-wise, what you get is almost a little bit like the summer side stories. It's a good avenue for endgame epic gear, and on top of that, you gotta choose what sets, which is a really cool part, and they can be swapped out anytime right here. Now, I recommend going for 2 4-piece sets and 2 2-piece sets, ideally split between offensive and defensive if you want to balance the count. I'm personally going with Destruction because it's the most OP set for any damage dealer under 220 speed. Speed set for faster builds, while immunity is my defensive secondary, and I'm hovering between HP or Torn set. HP set for my support units and Torn for Green Lilius. Now, if I'm a hard turn 2 game player, I do something like Destruction because once again, it's OP. I pick one between Lifesteal and Counter, then take immunity and probably HP set. Now, if I was a cleaver, then once again, I would take Destruction, Speed, Torn, and Pen. Just really aggressive. You get the idea. So, figure out what your account needs and choose accordingly. Season rewards are obtainable for this season, but they're going to come very slowly, and I'll explain why. I mean, the rewards are quite good, but you'll get a very slow trickle feed of them. So don't count on getting huge power spikes by brute forcing through the mode. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Rift Control. And as you do this game mode, you're going to be leveling it up. From here, I'm going to call it RC, and your RC will give you pretty big buffs that will make your run safer and faster, which will divide this content into 3 phases. Early game, which will be your first completed run, will be to reach RC level 2. It allows you to get your first power up, and getting your first power up will make your runs more consistent and safe. Here, right now, I'm using this one, which lets your backline hero with their S1s decrease their attack by 2 turns, and this effect goes through effect resistance. God bless for that. Now, mid-game would be getting all the way up to Rift 15, and maybe even Rift 21. I would say this will be where you kind of sack a lot of your stamina into not getting the most efficient farm, but it will give you more ways to augment your damage, and it will give you safer runs, which is really, really important, as you'll see in a bit. And throughout most of this guide, this is the footage you'll see me go through. And once you hit RC 21, you'll be hitting very, very late game. And this is going to be the content that you see the Kane unit showcase do. And the goal here is to obviously clear Rift in one run, and at most 2 for optimal amounts of farming. And I would say this is probably not doable until you hit Rift 21 and higher and you get the perfect builds, the most synergistic units. So it'll take you a while to get there, which is why the mode lasts 4 to 6 months. Now, let's talk about the boss a little bit. So while he's not the hardest, boy, is he tedious, and tedium without a challenge is the type of content that I don't really like. But I'm here for y'all, so for this season, we're going up against ML Xeon, Dark Xeon, and we can only bring fire heroes. Now, if you got any of the new pet for Rift mode, you're going to want to raise them up a bit before you head into this. Especially for this chance to receive double Rift energy and season score upon defeating the boss. It's not a huge margin, but when it does proc, boy, does it feel amazing. So you definitely want to at least have an A rank version of this. The other ones is to improve your chances to get a charm, maybe get an additional piece of gear. These are all pretty nice. I would say the one that's not necessary is to get extra reforged material, because this is for endgame, and if you're like me, when you do hit the endgame, you're going to have a lot of reforged materials left over just because you're doing hunts and your amount of gears that are worth reforging just aren't that much. So that's the one you can skip. But the most important one, I would say, is for the Rift energy. Now, your first run will cost 40 stamina, and your goal is to do as much damage as you can while surviving 40 turns. That's what the Rift Counter Force means, if you're ever curious. Every subsequent attempt will cost 20 stamina, like you see here. Meaning if you can clear the Rift in 3 turns, it costs you 30 stamina. If you can clear it in 5, it'll cost you 120. So doing damage while surviving is super key here. Now, this is a team I recommend for most people, and let's just get right into it and talk about what we're here to do. So, heading into the run, you'll see that Rift Protection has 40 stacks. And that's our objective. We're here to survive for 40 turns or until we can DPS down the boss. Once you survive the 40 turns, the fight ends and the boss's HP gets saved. If your team does not survive the 40 turns, you lose one of your tries, and it doesn't cost you anything. But on 3 wipes, the boss's HP will reset. So make sure you're bringing something consistent that can survive, but also deal damage like I have here. And I'll show you the builds in a second, after we talk about how to beat this level. And, really you want to minimize the amount of damage you use, or the amount of stamina you use for each of these runs. Now, what does this boss do? Lots of passives. First one, it gives him 2 of these buffs at the start of the fight and then 1 every turn. Now, the gimmick is that he can only have 10 buffs and debuffs combined on this bar right here. So in total, you want to start up and early and clutter him up with debuffs. So 1, it limits his amount of damage he can deal, and 2, you lock in some of these debuffs. But you have to keep in mind, getting the important debuffs in, since he's immune to all of these, and you want to play around that. And choose your heroes carefully. Here, I think the most important hero is Fire Haste, since his debuff avoids all of the immunities while packing the much coveted Defense Break, which will save you a lot of time and stamina. His second passive is a permanent debuff that disables all dual attacks. So you can tell this is targeted towards the common PvE cheese like A. Ross, Fire Shuri, Tamarin, Lilius. So we gotta be a bit more picky about who we bring. But one interesting mechanic he has is every 5 attacks, you'll see him proc this AoE missile, right? He'll shoot out a wave of missiles. It doesn't do that much damage, so as long as you're healthy, you'll be fine. But the important thing is it extends the duration of all of his debuffs. And you'll see it right here. Look at that. Shoots out a wave of missiles. It does a little bit of damage, and it extends the debuffs. And that is your main way of extending your defense break duration, and it is hugely important. His third skill is the same wave of missiles, but it's the one he shoots on his turn. Dispels 2 buffs from all enemies before attacking, So units like Milim will lose their evasion and then flicks burn for 3 turns. Can't trigger a counterattack. Cool. So those burns hurt quite a bit, and you definitely want to have cleanse and healing, and it matters quite a bit for this content. His 4th skill is a big fist. It prioritizes the front unit, so here it's Tamarin. It penetrates defense, and if it leaves you with less than half health, it'll take quite a bit of damage. So once again, you want to make sure you have sustain, but also very important, it also increases cooldown by 2 turns. So having a bit of ER or a unit that doesn't rely on cooldowns, like a Ken or a Fire Charlotte, is really, really important. Now, his ultimate is a big laser that's going to shred 1 turn of debuffs. So you'll need to make sure you proc him quite often, since every time his ultimate comes up, he clears a turn of it. And it detonates all burns. If you have a stealth unit here, he's going to deal big damage, and you really want to avoid that. This really has one purpose, and it's to screw with Jacko. Smilegate doesn't want you to be using Jacko, since if she's good here, they'll sell less copies of Kane on release. It's kind of gross, but that's the reality we live in, and, you know, he's going to get the job done. So it is what it is. So that's the mid-game of Rift, and you'll be repeating these runs until you get a clear. You'll get more rewards when you do get those clears, because otherwise you're really just getting 56k gold, you know, and then whatever your pet lets you have. But when you do finally beat him, you drop him to 0% HP, he'll drop you 2 pieces of gear. From what I've seen, my very small sample size, it is 1 purple plus a second piece with a 50% chance of being an epic red piece. Which is pretty good if you can get it down to like a run or 2, but most of the 3 runs, you know, it's there. It's not the best. And more importantly, this is about building up your Rift level so you can hit RC 21. And after that, I think it'll be much more smooth sailing from there. Let's talk units. These units will be for your first run to get to RC2, and then most of them will be your bread and butter until you have enough RC to run higher risk, higher DPS teams to try to go for that one shot. I think number 1, Fire Haste is a must-have for this event. His S3 has 2 bleeds and a defense break. His S2 has a heal block, but more importantly, Vampiric Touch, since it's going to allow him and his DPS units to sustain themselves. S1, once again, defense break. Probably the best multiplier for damage in the game. Enough said. You want him fast, but he doesn't have to be this fast. And you want him to be able to do a little bit damage. It's going to speed up your run quite a bit. Try to get up close to 120 effectiveness to land the debuffs. And, you know, on top of that, the bolt can help you survive some of these earlier runs. RNL as an artifact isn't mandatory, but proccing it does speed up your Rift counter for your first run and your first few runs, just to make the game a little bit safer. If you don't have them, I'm gonna be honest, not sure how you clear this game mode. Smilegate did say this was a hardcore end game mode, so having a hard unit requirement like this, while I don't like it, it is what it is. Definitely living up to the name. Next up, Fire Mercedes. She's an attack buffer, but more importantly, the boss's AoE will very reliably proc Magic for Friends, which combined with the attack buff will hit a lot and it'll hit hard. But the additional effect you really want is it ramps up as you hit back, hit the boss. It ramps up the hit count for the AoEs because it procs, the missiles proc once every 5 hits, if you remember I was talking about earlier, which extends the timer on our defense breaks. You just make sure she's faster than your other DPS units to get her attack buff up before they go, and she just needs a little bit of damage to speed up your runs. You can kind of skimp out on bulk with her since she has 2 lives with her exclusive artifacts that you can get at the end of episode 3, Magic for Friends. Now, if you're playing on her on manual without autoing her, you should be soul burning her S2 every single time she has attack buff up. Since she's one of the starter units, I think everybody should be running her. Our other DPS for this run, Bomb Model Kana. She's here, very simple. Attack buff herself for a bit of damage, speed up your team, and her damage with Bloodstone should go pretty far in topping your team off, and it's just here to keep your runs safe. You can run any other DPS artifacts or look to replace her if you don't have Bloodstone, but I do like her quite a bit. Here, I make sure she's just on free DPS gear, and she's slower than the Mercedes to catch the attack buff before she goes. I have a bit of bulk here as a margin of error, and if you're playing her on manual, you should always look to soul burn her S3 just to give more value out of that attack buff. Here, I don't even have an EE just because I don't think it matters, but more importantly, I ran out of currency rolling one for haste, so I don't think it matters. None of the effects matter, and just give her some stats with that. If you don't have her, a couple units I think you can use are Milim with Caladra, Melissa with Bloody Rose, Ken with, honestly, any damage artifacts. Zella Carmine Rose I think is like a pretty good free-to-play replacement since she can drop a little bit of debuffs and buff herself. And if you're feeling a little bit feisty, you can actually use a Jacko like I do. I only use Jacko for the first and second run when I'm feeling lucky, just because she's going to get so many attacks in that you're very likely to proc more of those missiles in the AoE, which flushes her out of the stealth, and hopefully she just dodges the laser completely. I think her damage is worth it. You know, on the first run, if she dies and you don't get a lot of points, I just top right twice, you reset the entire run. So you can kind of replace this with a lot of units. Now, the last unit I use here is Tamarin. And you really want about yay bulk with about this much speed. A 200 ER, I would say, is really clutch since you want to resist that 2-turn cooldown delay. Prophetic Candlestick is kind of the important artifact here since the boss either attacks the front unit or in an AoE, making the cooldown extra important since her S1 doesn't bring a dual attack anymore, so you want to get as many S2s as possible. To replace her, I'm told Hazel on Candlestick is just a better version for the front, though I can't verify that personally since my Hazel isn't ruined. Now, for your first run, if you're really having a lot of issues, I would use Fire Acades over Tamarin just for that first run, since she has an infinite loop of S2 on herself and then S3 to infinitely heal your team. It'll take you more tries, but very importantly, you really just want to get out of that first run, and it guarantees you can survive past the 40 turn every time. Now, with enough fine-tuning and refining, you should be able to get to a point where every 3 runs will get you a clear, and that's kind of where I am right now, which should steadily get you more RC levels, but it's still not the most optimal for farming since it's 80 stamina per clear, which is 80 stamina for a 50% chance to get an epic piece of gear out of 4 sets. It's okay, not great odds. I think for the best farming, you'll still have to wait till Kane releases to start one-shotting runs like you see in Kane's release video. If your aim is to be super efficient, then that would be my recommendation, since that would make it 40 stamina for a 50% chance to get 1 epic drop and a purple drop. And I think that kind of covers everything you need to know going into Rift. I think you guys see what I mean now when I say this is a really long-term project here to replace Hunt. It's certainly an interesting approach that shakes up the Hunt meta we've had for years. I can't say I'm the biggest fan from talking to people in the community, but there are a few people, not me, that are having fun with it, and I think that's what matters at the end of the day in a video game. Have fun. If you think you can have fun with this mode, by all means go for it, even if it's a little bit tough, but if you think it's too much of a hassle, forget it, stick to Hunts. You're not missing out on much. But that being said, that's all I got for this video. I'm tired as heck. I've been Uncle Valk, and I'm here to help the community play the video game. Hope this intro guide to Rift has helped you, and I hope you can help me back by giving the video a like, a subscribe, and maybe talking to people in the comments if you think you found a crazy tech or a strat that's going to be able to help us run this much more smoothly. I'm not usually a PvE content creator, but Rift has been different enough, and at the very least, even if I don't like it, and interesting enough for me to want to break the mold of making PvP only content. I'll probably make a follow-up guide after Kane drops for a more final optimized version of this content. But that's it from me for today. Stay safe out there, guys, and have a great rest of your day or night, wherever you guys are. See ya.